in America today. They have redefined general news, and we have got to challenge that. Why is it, if they have these retired generals on the payroll, they don't have peace activists and peace leaders also on the payroll? So let's have the same number of reporters embedded with Iraqi families. Let's have reporters embedded in the peace movement all over the world. And maybe then we'll get some accurate picture of what's going on. Aaron Brown had some interesting comments. He said no, because these generals are analysts. He said he admits they came late to the peace movement. But once the war started, those voices are irrelevant. Because then the war is on.
It's just not the relevant question right now.
Why not?
Because it's over. It's on. It's being done.
I asked him, well, how would the Vietnam War ever have ended then? And do you think we would have seen the most famous picture from the Vietnam War, that picture of the little girl with the napalm burning all over her? Would he have seen that picture that helped end the war? And he said, well, of course. I said, how? We are seeing these romanticized pictures of soldiers against sunsets. And the planes on those aircraft carriers that the embedded photographers are getting at the sunrise hour. The Newsday reporter who did this profile today asked about my engaging in advocacy journalism. And I said, well, the establishment reporters are my model.
Revolutionary coverage and the power of NBC.
Think about Dan Rather the night that the bombs started falling on Iraq. He said, good morning, Baghdad.
CBS News has been told.
And Tom Brokaw said, we don't want to destroy the infrastructure of Iraq because we're going to own it in a few days.
Shock and awe.
And then Peter Jennings was interviewing Chris Cuomo, who is a reporter for ABC. And he was out on the street where we were, Times Square, thousands of people in the freezing rain who had come out to protest the war. And they had all sorts of signs that were sopping wet, and people were trying to keep the umbrellas up, and the police charged part of the crowd. Jennings said to Cuomo, what are they doing out there? What are they saying? And he said, well, they have these signs that say things like no blood for oil, but when you ask them what that means, they seem very confused. I don't think they know why they're out here. I guess they got caught in a traffic jam. Well, why not have Peter Jennings, why doesn't he, instead of asking someone who clearly doesn't understand why they're out there, invite one of them into the studio and have a discussion, like he does with the generals?
You know, it's captivating to watch this technology at work.
Why don't they also put doctors on the payroll? That way you can have the general talking about the bomb that Lockheed Martin made and the kind of a plane that drops it and whether it was precision guided or not. And then you can have the doctor talking about the effect of the bomb. You know, not for or against the war, just how a cluster bomb enters your skin and what it means when your foot is blown off, if you're lucky and you're not killed. So why not have doctors and generals at least? But this is just to show how low the media has gone.
Stay brave, stay aware, and stay with Fox.
I mean, you have not only Fox, but MSNBC and NBC, yes, owned by General Electric, one of the major nuclear weapons manufacturers in the world, but MSNBC and NBC, as well as Fox, titling their coverage, taking the name of what the Pentagon calls the invasion of Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom. So that's what the Pentagon does. You expect that. They research the most effective propagandistic name to call their operation. But for the media to name their coverage what the Pentagon calls it, every day seeing Operation Iraqi Freedom, you have to ask, if this were state media, how would it be any different?
In Iraq, it was
protests. But it's not those events that we're talking about. It's the daily drumbeat coverage, who's interviewed on the front pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post, who gets the headline stories and the network newscasts. That matters. They're the ones shaping foreign policy. Fair did a study. In the week leading up to General Colin Powell going to the Security Council to make his case for the invasion, and the week afterwards, this was the period where more than half the people in this country were opposed to an invasion. They did a study of CBS Evening News, NBC Nightly News, ABC Evening News, and the News Hour with Jim Lehrer, PBS. The 4 major newscasts, 2 weeks. 393 interviews on war. 3 were anti-war voices. 3 of almost 400, and that included PBS. This has to be changed. It has to be challenged. We are not the only ones at Pacifica Radio, NPR stations. We are not the only ones that are using the public airwaves. They are too. And they have to provide the diversity of opinion that fully expresses the debate and the anguish and the discussions that are going on all over this country. That is media serving a democratic society. For a while, in talks before the invasion, I've been saying, as we see the full-page pictures of the target on Saddam Hussein's forehead, that it would be more accurate to show a target on the forehead of a little Iraqi girl, because that's who dies in war. The overwhelming majority of people who die are innocent civilians. And then what happens on the first night of the invasion? Missile strikes a residential area in Baghdad. They say they think they've taken out Saddam Hussein. Independent reporter Maggie Welsh, who stayed there as the bombs fell, who you heard on Democracy Now! On a regular basis, went to the hospital right after that first attack. And there was a 4-year-old girl critically injured from that missile attack. And her mother critically injured, and her mother's sister. That's who dies. That's who gets injured in war. Gandhi asking, when he was asked, what do you think of Western civilization? He said, I think it would be a good idea. Here are some of the headlines. Can you help me get my arms back? Do you think the doctors can get me another pair of hands? If I don't get a pair of hands, I'll commit suicide. These were the words of 12-year-old Ali Ismail Abbas, who lost his arms, was orphaned, and received severe burns when a missile hit his home 10 days ago. The wounded Iraqi boy has begun eating food and drinking normally after recovering from initial surgery at a hospital in Kuwait City to place a temporary graft over the deep burns covering his chest, abdomen, and groin. He's expected to undergo further surgery that will involve grafting skin from his own body. The badly burned child amputee has become the icon of civilian suffering in the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. His pregnant mother, father, brother, and 12 other relatives died when a missile obliterated their home. One story. And I think of the woman from the shock jock station who asked, now what do you think? Are you really not going to call this a victory? I talked earlier about it being such a dark day for journalism in this country. It's a dark day for journalism around the world with, at this point, I think 14 journalists killed, an incredibly high proportion of the foreign deaths. We don't know the number of Iraqi